Welcome to the Heritage Rewind with A&E. I'm Andrew, a proud millennial with stories for days. And this is my co-host Elijah, my son, a sharp-witted Gen Zer who keeps me in check. Together we're rewinding through Black culture and heritage, comparing my back-in-the-day experiences with his life today. Along the way, we'll chat with incredible guests from our community, sharing lessons, laughs, and insights that bridge the gap between generations.
Yeah, I wanted an outlet where I could talk about the topics that I can relate to the most. The vision for this podcast is to have few episodes with just me and my dad, but eventually have members of the Black community or people that have shaped mine and my dad's lives.
So sit back, listen in, and join us as we explore where we've been, where we are, and where we're headed. This is Heritage Rewind with A&E. Hey folks, in this episode we'll discuss the differences and similarities between my life throughout school and my son's life, which is very, very different, and how we think the education system should address racial discrimination and racial identity. Alright, so here we go. Let's get into it. Let's start with the first question. What was the Black population at your school when you were growing up, and how did that affect your school life?
Okay, so for me personally, the Black population in my school was about, I think it's 93, 94, something like that. And for me, it made it feel more inclusive. It made it feel like I was more welcome to be myself at school and see people look like me and actually like feel welcomed and like educated.
Okay.
And how was that for you?
For me, so growing up in Summerside, PEI,
Yeah.
our family was only one of two Black families in town. There was us and there was the Arsenals, but they moved to Charlottetown when I was like in grade 1, grade 2. So growing up in school, in elementary, junior high, and high school, I was the only Black kid in the school. In elementary, that's actually not entirely true. In elementary, your Uncle Darcy came in. He was in grade 1 and I was in grade 6, so now there were two of us. The Black population doubled in the school. But it was interesting because you go through these different stages and phases. So like when I was in elementary school, that was really the first time that I was on the receiving end of racism. So like and it wasn't necessarily the N-word per se. It was, I remember there was these two guys. They remind me of Beavis and Butthead, but that's another story for another time. They would call me like moo moo and like chocolate milk and like really dumb things like that, but it was clear like the intent is like we're gonna get under your skin and we're gonna say racist things. It would slowly up itself from there. But what was really interesting was it wasn't mom coming to the school and have my back. It was some of the older kids. There was a group of kids who were in a grade or two above me. So like when I was in grade 2, they'd be in grades 3 and 4, and so on and so forth. And they'd always have my back. In fact, they were beating up people for saying racist things for me before I even got to them. So that helped a lot. But in school, we'll talk about this a little bit later, I'm sure, the teachers really didn't know what to do. Like, it's not like at your school where, like, yes, out of 1,400 kids, 100 they shoved them are Black. But out of a school of 600, I'm the only one. And chances were, for most of these teachers, I was the first Black kid they've ever met / taught, right?
Yeah.
So going through that, they didn't really know what to do. So we sort of all figured it out on our way. And at the time, it was a really big negative for me. But now, like looking back on it, you know, being the first or the only, and now doing what I do, I learned a lot and it helped prepare me for what I'm doing today. If that makes sense.
Alrighty. So then what was the best and your worst memory of being in school?
My best memory. So every February 21st, it's the International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. Well, there's a mouthful that we got in one take. Wow. when I was in grade 4, I wanted to put up a poster that said, "Stop racism now." And it was like it was a stop sign, right? And I thought I was super clever. So brought in the poster on this day and asked my principal if I could put it up. And he said, "Absolutely, Andrew, you can put that up. But let's do something even more." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "I got an idea." And like, so he puts up my poster in the school. It ends up in the announcements about that day being that day. And then about a week later, he said, "I want you to show some. I want you to see something." So across the hall from the principal's office were all these posters that he was our principal. He was also our music teacher, and he had all the students who come in through his music class create these posters about stopping racism. Racism is bad, like all these other things, and it was plastered all over the wall for the end of February, and that was really cool. That was my best memory when I'm growing up through school, and then the worst memory for me, and it didn't even hit me until I was done of grade school. But in our elementary school, Elm Street Elementary, there's this big mural that sits at the entrance of the school, and it was painted. I can't remember who painted. PEI folks, if you remember who painted, drop it in the comments. But it was all of us playing on the playground. It was like a mural. It was almost as if somebody took a drone over the school. So you can see the school. All kinds of kids are playing. And I'm in the mural. And I know it's me. Because, again, I'm the only black kid in the school. So there's myself and a little white boy. I like to think it was one of my bigger bullies, but I don't know for sure. And there's a teacher. And what it was depicting was me and this other kid probably getting in trouble talking to the teacher. And in the moment, I thought, "Oh, that's cool. I made the mural." But then, like, as I was graduating high school and you're reflecting back on everything, I'm like, that's what I was remembered for at my elementary school, was the kid who was always getting picked on or getting in trouble. And for me, that was my worst one, because like that's how that was going to be memorialized. I don't know if that painting's still there or not. We'll have to track that down at some point when we go over and visit Nana Bev or Great Grammy. But that stuck with me and still sticks with me today. I'm like, that's how I was remembered in my 6 years. Not as, Andrew the student, but Andrew the black kid who was always on the receiving end of getting in trouble, and here he is memorializing this painting talking to his teacher.
Okay.
So we got super deep there. We got to bring it back up a bit. So I'm going to flip it off to you, and we're going to start with the best part, because we got to bring it back up, because we're losing viewers like crazy, I'm sure. But what was your best memory from school so far? Because you still have a few months left, right?
Yeah, I think it's because when we moved to Trevor, it was like mid-pandemic, and like stuff was kind of getting boring. Then I went to Trevor Middle School, or it was called Trevor Junior High. They changed it for some odd reason. But when I got to high school eventually in grade 9, the school wasn't made for grade 9s yet. It was the second year they allowed grade 9 to go to high school. So then I met Mr. Mullins, and he said, "You should join the football team." I didn't want to, and he was like one of the only black like educators at the school at the time. I was like, "Oh, this guy's cool. I'm gonna hang out with him more often." And then he showed me the Afrocentric Aspiring Leaders Youth Group like meetings and rooms and stuff, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool. I've never seen this before." So then I started going to the meetings, have more fun, and then grade 10 was like, maybe football might be fun. So then I started joining football, and he goes, "Oh, he's one of the coaches, so that's why he wanted me to join." And I was like, "This is cool. I like the sport." So then I got more involved in the black community. I started going to like the student advisory council meetings and like the student council and stuff. And it got fun for me, and it actually made me feel more welcome to the school, and it made it easier to transition from middle school to high school.
Nice, nice. So football was your best memory through your 4 years at CEC.
Yeah.
All
Exactly.
right, all right. So then, what was your worst memory in school?
It was actually in elementary school. So in elementary school, I obviously you know I got hurt all the time.
Yeah.
Spent a lot of time in the office with band-aids on. And at one time this kid tried to fight me, and I didn't realize it until I was probably in junior high at the time. But, like, he was fighting me because I was the only black kid, because he kept on calling me monkey, and I was like, oh, like, cool, like I can swing from trees and stuff. But now I realize, maybe that wasn't right, because like I kept on getting hurt, and I'm like, you guys kind of told me I probably shouldn't fight since I'm in elementary school, and Grandpa's just like, go at him. So then one day I was like, he tries to fight me, like he pushes me down, and I get up and I end up hurting him. I think he ended up like getting a con on his forehead because I threw him against the wall.
Cool.
But yeah, like that's when I realized it's like, oh, like the world isn't so nice. So it's not as nice as I thought it was. And then, I'm just like, okay, I gotta actually be like more cautious and stuff. And then you got into EDI. So then it became an interesting topic.
No, for sure. Thank you for. I that's no. Now, smart podcasters, we would have rehearsed this. We're not smart podcasters, you see. So this is the first time I'm hearing this. So like, absorbing it in, just taking it in, and we'll chat a bit later. But one more question here before we go to our first break. How have your school experiences shaped your understanding of race and identity?
Okay, yeah. So like as I said, like it, being black, especially in Nova Scotia, where Americans don't know where that is. So, like being told, oh, like Canada isn't as bad for racism. It is. It just no one pays attention to it. So it like being black, it feels like it's you're constantly getting like pushed down, but like you kind of have to say like, hey, I can do everything you can do. Just because of the color of my skin doesn't mean I'm any less qualified for the job or for the position or to be smart in school. And that made me discover like because I want to do psychology to help African Canadians or just any sort of like black people with their mental health from like an Afrocentric point of view. Just like basically, I want to educate people, but also help them at the same time. And it shaped me because now I realize that like everyone goes through like mental health struggles and like especially after the pandemic, being locked in your house for
Mm.
6 months at a time.
Mm.
So now I want to do that for the rest of my life, and I want to make change with the black community. I want to be involved in public speaking events, like the speaking event that I did for the rally at the park.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the Juniper Street development there. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, how did that? How did how did your school experiences shape your understanding of race and identity?
Um, for a long time, like even up to my early 20s, um, being black was more of a burden. It wasn't something that I was proud of, and this is what drives a lot of my visits. With other black kids, not only you, but like at your school, and then at Truro Middle, and all throughout the region that I cover with work. But I wasn't proud to be black because it was so much of a burden from teachers not knowing how to read To Kill a Mockingbird with me because there's a couple of words in that book. Um, to when things happen, showing sympathy over empathy are two different things. And then just the constant fights. Like I got into so many fights in elementary, less so in junior high and none in high school, but yeah, just a lot of fights. So it was more of a burden than anything else. And it wasn't until really we ended up having you back in 2007 where there was sort of that mind shift for me in terms of okay, being proud to be black, learning about your history, That was when we started having conversations with Aunt Donna in Toronto. She's done a lot of genealogy work with our family in terms of going back. I think she went back 6 or 7 generations recently. But it was so much of a burden. But at the same time, when I look at where I'm at today, whether it's through Curlin and the Black Rock Initiative, whether it's through my work with the provincial government, or just being with community every day at events or whatever. If it wasn't for those struggles, if it wasn't for being the first or the only, or like when I jump up on stage and I'm talking to folks about equity, diversity, inclusion, if it wasn't from being from PEI, being first and only, playing curl and being the first and only, volleyball, even basketball, there was no diversity on that team. I wouldn't have been able to get to the place where I'm at in my career today. So all those experiences in schools, although it was painful at the time, and I say it to folks all the time, like, be proud of who you are. Don't be like me and go through your 20s thinking, oh man, this black thing, this is too much. Like, be proud of who you are, because the sooner you can be proud of who you are, like, the amazing things can happen to you. Like, that's ultimately what led to getting to talk to Her Excellency, the Governor General, a couple of times. That's what's led to great friendships with folks like Nevin, who we want to have on the podcast one day, so heads up. Folks like Drew, folks like Butch, folks like Natasha, like, all that could have happened in my life so much sooner had I spent more time embracing being black than not trying to push it away necessarily, but I guess not being proud, if that makes sense.
Alrighty.
All right, so we're getting into it right now. We're gonna have a break, but we will be right back. One.
Welcome back to the Heritage Rewind with A&E. I'm Elijah, and this is my dad, Andrew. Okay, so overall, how was your high school experience, and are you happy with your current? Are you happy where you are currently in your career?
So first question, overall, how was my high school experience? Overall, if I had to measure it on a scale, it was pretty good. I really enjoyed my 3 years in high school. A lot of the folks that, not a lot, a chunk of the folks that I met, I'm still friends with today. Not only like through social media friends, but folks that I get to talk to every now and then. And plus, at the end of the day, for the most part, they all had my back. When something was to happen, like if somebody was to call me the N-word, which did happen once, he was already being pummeled on the ground by the time I had gotten to him, ran around the corner and gotten to him. So overall, it was good. And am I happy with where I am currently in my career? Answer is yes, for the moment. And I don't want to be taken away of, like, I don't like my job with the provincial government. I do. But I always tried to place myself in spaces and places where I can have the greatest impact. And right now, through working with African Nova Scotian Affairs, I can have the greatest impact on my community. But that doesn't mean that in 6 months, that's not the greatest place for me to have the greatest impact for community. Maybe it's working for the town of Truro, for example. Maybe it's going to work for some organization that's based in Toronto, or wherever that is. Like, I don't know. Because people pick on me about that, like, oh, you change jobs a lot. I'm like, yeah, no. I'm aware. Thank you. I'm aware. But I go to the spaces and places where I think I can have the greatest impact. And right now, that's with our current community here in Truro, the Hill, the Marsh, and the Island. And I'm working with the provincial government. So, I got a question for you. How do you think your time at university will go, based on everything that we've talked about so far in the podcast?
Okay, if I stay away from the parties and all the drinking and the climbing and all the poles and stuff, because
He will stay away from it. Continue.
I think it will go relatively well. I'll be in student debt until I'm like 45 at least, but besides that, that's fine. I think that I'll enjoy it. Probably the first year is probably going to be a little bit stressful and chaotic, depending on if I stay at home and go to the Dal campus here, or maybe I go to Dal in the city, or maybe I go somewhere else. It, it may be a little bit difficult with housing and having to pay for housing and university, but I feel like the other 3 years plus my master's and everything else, I think that will go relatively okay as long as I stay like focused on my goals.
All right. So, two follow-up questions. First one, and he's like, "There's no follow-up questions on the computer screen." Oh, there are now. First question: tell the folks what it is that you want to study in school. I know what it is, but they don't.
Yeah, I probably should have started off with that. So in university, I would like to study psychology. I want to get my bachelor's of arts in psychology, and then I want to work up to get my master's, and then after that, there's like a psychology 2 year program that I have to go to, and then after that, I want to become a psychologist that works with African Nova Scotians or just African Canadians from like an Afrocentric point of view, basically like an Afrocentric understanding of I've been through some of the stuff you've been through, and like it's I mean it shouldn't be normal, but it happens at some point in your life, especially as a black man or black woman or black person in Canada.
All right. So my second question, then follow-up question, would be the black leaders that you have in school, and you mentioned Les earlier. We had Doug Sparks, who was your principal there for a couple of years. Other different leaders. I know Butch comes into the school every now and then. Um, how have they prepared you for what's next in university?
So yeah, they come in and they come to the Afrocentric meetings and stuff like that, and they talk about how their experiences have been and how there's now funding and there's scholarships and there's bursaries for African Nova Scotian youth, and there's universities that are saving up seats specifically for marginalized communities, and they make it so that it's easier. Like TJ Jordan, one of the he works for FutureWorks. He helps write resumes and cover letters and stuff like that, and he's been in there. He's like gone through my resume, and he said, "Oh, like this looks good." Or Natasha, she's come in once talking about black youth painting the futures. So that helps me prepare. It makes me feel like confident because it makes me feel like I have a summer job that will look good on my resume, and it makes me feel like I'm more ready knowing that I have people supporting me that want me to succeed in school instead of you had people that wanted you to succeed when you succeeded mostly, and I have more support and like more drive to want to get my degree.
Okay, all right. And shout out to many folks in community, but shout out to Ashley Hill and the Prep Academy for all the awesome work that they've done. All right, so now we're sort of into the final segment of the pod. We're going to talk about room for change, if you will. So, how can we change how schools talk about racial discrimination and racial identity?
Yeah, so our school has the Afrocentric Aspiring Leaders Youth Group, and we have like the Prep Academy, which helps get African Nova Scotian youth into universities and stuff like that. And I think that, well, we also have African Canadian Studies, so there is still room for change, and the schools are going to evolve. We're getting new textbooks, hopefully getting rid of textbooks eventually because no one reads them. Everything's online. We look at slideshows all day. So eventually there will be more change. There will be more black educators, and whether it's teachers or guidance counselors or whatever they want to be in a school, principals or vice principals. There will be more of that, and then there will be more black students that will go to different schools, and everything will hopefully at one point get more diverse. But I believe that um like it should be more open. Like it shouldn't be because if a black student gets in a fight with a white student, it feels like more of an interrogation because you have to now sit in the office with that person and their parents and your parents, and their parents are gonna pick his kid's side, and your parents are gonna pick your kid's side.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that should be different. Like now, if a black student or if a white student says the N word or any discriminatory word towards a specific race, they have to now. I think they get 2 days out of school, 1 day in school, or something like that. And they have to now go through a whole entire slideshow and like it's almost like a rehabilitation like piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's about, hey, like this is where this comes from, and like how would you feel if someone like did something like that to you, like made you feel uncomfortable in a space where they're supposed to feel safe, and then they have to write like a handwritten apology to the student and then come back to school and act more politely. So I think that there is room for change, and hopefully I want it to work faster because I want it to be like my kids shouldn't have to worry about being called the N word or being discriminated at all.
Mm-hmm.
I want it to be like more open for everyone.
All right. All right. Um, in terms of flipping that question around back to myself, I think the first thing that we have to do is when you go to schools is the whole code of conduct, and somewhere in that code of conduct, it says something along the lines of racism and discrimination will not be tolerated, and then it goes on to the next rule. But we never talk about why racism and discrimination isn't tolerated. Like, yes, there's the throwing of the racial slurs and whatnot, but we don't really talk about at any level the psychological harm that is caused when racism happens, right? And not that I think that will change every single person's mind at the school, and it's not even necessarily about the students because, and I mean this in the nicest way possible, teenagers are going to do stupid things from time to time. It just kind of happens,
You're
right?
telling me.
But I think that conversation is important for the teachers who either understand it and they're trying to do the best for the students. Sometimes they don't get it. And we know that there's teachers not only here in Truro, but throughout the province and throughout the country for that matter, who just don't care. Right? And I think it's a lot of this gets put onto them in terms of I just need you to sit down and actively listen for a moment. It's not about I want Mrs. Smith to eliminate all racism everywhere. No, like, let's not go crazy. But it's about taking time to listen and taking time to acknowledge what you don't know and to do better moving forward. Because when we talk about reducing racism in schools, this is a movement and not a moment. Like, yes, if someone is to say a racial slur to another student, whether it's you or somebody else, we have the tools to be able to deal with that moment. We talked about suspensions there a moment ago and going through some of that restorative justice process piece. But what are we doing to educate folks? What are we doing so that if this happens again, that we all have the tools and resources at our disposal, whether that's teachers, whether that's student support workers, which actually I'm going to get to in a moment. But what are we doing to be able to do better next time? And then on top of that, and this is sort of point number 2 to that, in your school and a number of schools, we have the African Nova Scotian student support workers. Not every school, but a number of schools have a number of different black teachers and black administrators on the team. We have the regional centers for education that normally have staff to support African Nova Scotian students. We need to make sure that they're supported. And I'm not just talking about in pay, but that they have the tools and resources that when they go to the tables where change happens, that they are listened to and that some of that change actually takes place. Because in order for us to do better, we need to be better. And that's not just within the classroom, that's within all streams that sort of hit the schools, if that makes sense. But yeah, like this, I could talk about this absolutely all day long, but trying to keep the podcast, not hours and hours long, because who's going to listen to it at that point? But um, next question. Actually, sorry, our last question is: how do you think a black student should deal with racism at school? And I'm going to adjust this question a bit. To say, how do you think a black student could deal with racism that they face within their school?
So I think it affects everyone differently. Like some people want to keep it to themselves, some people are embarrassed about it, some people are mad about it. And what a student should do is go to the principal, go to the guidance counselor, and say, "Hey, this happened. This is like the student's name. If you don't know the student's name, just like this is what they look like. If you can help, please help." And it's then up to the educators and the principal and the school board to now handle that situation and make it right, whether it's suspending the student, talking to the student's parents, or both. And then the restorative justice part of it is, like fixing what you did. Really, it's not fixing. You can't really fix like that emotion. Like it's still gonna affect the student, but at least helping them like through it. And that's what students should do. However, not everyone does that. Some people get in trouble and fight, and then it makes the situation a lot worse. But yeah, so how do you think a student should handle that?
Well, I think to your point, and it's important for us to say, like, every student is going to handle this differently, and we have to remember that when something racist happens, that's something traumatic in a young person's life. It's traumatic for any age, but we have to remember it's a incident of trauma. So that's first and foremost. What I would say not to do, and I'm coming back to my own time in school, is don't just immediately fight. And I say that only because that's what the other person wants you to do. I had this conversation with a member of town council a couple months ago here in the town of Toronto. When something happens, like the rage inside me is just bubbling up to the surface. And if I just let it all go, then yes, it's going to be a lot of expletives and a lot of me getting up into somebody's face, and it's going to go down for real. But at the same time, that's when other people, those white people, see, well, that's just the angry black guy. And Andrew's just an angry black guy, so can't talk to him now. So now it almost gets reversed to where the person who said something racist is suddenly the victim because I've flown off the handle, and if I fly off the handle, anything could happen at that point. So before getting to that point, I'm not saying like never ever fight. I'm saying before you get to that point where you're throwing fists, take care of yourself first, right? Like, who are you surrounding yourself with in the day to day? And as a side note, we as parents have to make sure that we're playing a role in making sure that our kids feel comfortable enough to come to us when something happens. And I say that as a father who still doesn't do a good enough job with that with this guy over here. But it's making sure that if our children come to see us, that we sit there with active listening and, to my earlier point, don't fly off the handle themselves. But at school, for me, it was, okay, I had my circle of friends. Now, yes, when I was growing up, they were all white, and that was just by circumstance. and they can be white in your case today, or they can be black. It doesn't really matter. But surround yourself with a group that you can vent to, that can support you, and then going to the administration, teachers, principal, whatever. But also keeping in the back of your mind that just because you went to the school's administration doesn't mean that problem's going to be solved immediately. Like, to your point, you're going to have to explain what happened. So that's a level of re-traumatization. If you go through restorative justice, there could potentially be a re-traumatization there and explain how did that make you feel. I'm not saying that restorative justice is bad necessarily. It's just, remember there is a process to this. And I would hope for young people anywhere, whether you're in university or high school, wherever you may be watching the podcast today, that when you see something racist happen, it's not on the victim or the person who's on the receiving end to be able to deal with that. You should be able to come in as an ally to offer support to that individual, even if it's just simply asking, are they okay? Are you okay? That's extremely helpful as well. But yeah, it's trying to remain cool and collected in a place where you're experiencing so much trauma. But I do recommend, if you're having trouble in school in and around racism, finding that safe place to go to, whether it's parents, teachers, and to be able to talk it out from there. So that's it for today. Thank you for taking the time to sit down with me and chat. Only speaking for myself here. I learned a ton of things about you, even a couple of things that I didn't know coming into this podcast. Again, we didn't prep or record or anything like that. But thanks for taking the time to sit down, be open, and vulnerable with me.
Yeah, thank you as well. This is like your 30-minute coffee break here. You're working on the weekends and all that stuff. So thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down in your office and have this chat.
That was so dripping in sarcasm, and I swear I'm not a workaholic. This is a project that I'm super excited to get to work on with Elijah. Thanks for rewinding with us today on Heritage Rewind with A&E. We hope you enjoyed today's journey through Black culture, heritage, and the stories that connected us. This is only the first episode. We will be back for more episodes on a weekly basis.
If you enjoyed the show, hit that follow button and share with other folks and leave us a review. It means the world. Until next time, keep honoring the past, living the present, inspiring the future, and catch you on the rewind.
See you later.